pick up with accreditation. Chancellor?
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board. You will see behind the tab on accreditation the most recent summary. And I'll do a couple of things. Let me first sort of bring you up to date on City College of San Francisco, and General Counsel Goldberg is here if you have any specific questions related to the lawsuit by the City and County Attorney Herrera in San Francisco County. You will recall that the Board of Governors elevated their special trustee to take on the powers of the board in July of last year. Since that time, the college has made really, I think, remarkable progress. And thankfully, the commission, working with the U.S. Department of Education, created a new status called restoration, and the college has applied for that status. They're in the midst of creating the required self-study, which is due in early October. Then the commission will, at that point, send a team into the college to take a look at and verify the self-study. And you may recall that in order to be granted restoration status, the college must, on the one hand, meet the eligibility requirements, and secondly, they must demonstrate the capacity to come into full compliance with the standards within a 2-year period of time. Assuming they meet those two criteria, the commission will vote in January to allow them into restoration, and if they are granted restoration, then they will have between January of 2015 and the end of 2016 to complete that process. Now, it's not literally 24 months because in order to demonstrate compliance, they'll have to do a self-study in advance of the end of that, and then the commission will send in a team. So it's really about 1.5 years, but the college, I think, is well down the road to coming into compliance. So I'm guardedly optimistic that that's the way that process will go. On the broader, any questions on City College?
Yeah, what is their enrollment like this fall 2014 as a result of everything that's been going on?
They've lost, Paul, about 25% overall.
11% from last fall, about 25 to 27%.
Yeah, since they started into this, about 1/4 of their student body. And what we've seen is the decline has softened and slowed down considerably. So their semester over semester this time last year is only about 11% down. And I would imagine their headcount enrollment is somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 75,000. I don't know what those numbers are. I haven't seen an actual enrollment report yet.
Okay, thank you.
And the Herrera lawsuit, what is the status of that, and what impact would it have if he wins?
Well, it's currently set for trial in October, and the answer to your question is really unknown. It depends on how the court would ultimately fashion its order. It could be that he completely throws out the entire accreditation determination, in which case, in theory, then the college is no longer with his status, of termination pending or restoration status. But it's really difficult to know at this point. Currently pending are some summary adjudication motions, which might limit the scope of that trial. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there, and that might give us an indication.
Member Hawkins?
Thank you. Michelle, just because I'm not a lawyer like several of you in the room, what is the status of a state court filing a lawsuit against a federal agency? What's their oversight, or do they have oversight?
It has to do with, it's an anomaly for me as well. It has something to do with business practices and the fact that the federal agency is depriving the college of its rights as a business, effectively, as I understand it. There was some filing within there. I actually haven't gone down and looked at it. It didn't get kicked out of court, so it obviously has stood to this point.
On the broader issue of accreditation, we provided you with an updated summary. I would call your attention to the last page of the spreadsheet, and you'll see that the percentage, of our colleges now on sanction has dropped from a high in 2012 of about 20% down to 14% now. I would be quick to add that if we even have one college on sanction, that's one too many. And it is certainly our intention to work with colleges to get them off sanction. I think one encouraging note is that with only a couple of exceptions, the colleges that were on sanction are no longer on sanction. So there are some of them that are still trying to work their way off, but what you see here continues to be colleges that struggle mainly with governance, student learning outcomes, program evaluation, and finance are the chief reasons that these colleges are struggling. Obviously, the report we had right before lunch about the technical assistance unit, we certainly hope will help over time get this number down to 0, which is where it belongs. We don't want any of our colleges to being experiencing sanctions. Then on the last page, you see the summary of who came on and who went off, and so you can see the movement of the institutions back to good status with the Accrediting Commission.
What is it?
President
Sorry.
Vaughn? Member Epps.
What does it mean? I mean, what's the difference between being on warning and probation? And
There are 3 levels of sanction and accreditation. The least onerous is warning. The probation is the middle level, and show cause is the worst. In the case, they have definitions. Interestingly enough, for the first time ever, all the 6 regional commissions are going to have joint definitions of what those 3 mean. In the Western region, historically, warning has meant that you are out of compliance with 1 or 2 of the standards, probation that you are out of compliance with several, and show cause is that by the definition of that means show us why we should not take your accreditation away. That's when a college is in substantial noncompliance.
I was just going to ask, with only 5 districts on probation or colleges on probation now, none on show cause, has at least one maybe positive outcome of the renewed attention on accreditation through City College San Francisco made an impact in our trustees and other districts taking more proactive in addressing accreditation standards, or is the system just a lot better than it was 2 years ago?
Well, I think it's a combination of the two. I really do believe that some of the colleges that experienced sanctions in the last couple of years, especially those that were driven by financial reasons, were the result of 4 years of pretty severe financial hits that these colleges took. I also believe, as you point out, that it is beginning to dawn on trustees, on CEOs, on leadership up and down the state that if the commission comes in and looks at the institution and gives it recommendations, and they come back 6 years later and those recommendations have not been acted upon, that they're going to end up on sanction, whereas that was not the case 5, 7, 10 years ago. So I think it's a combination of institutions that have come through a really difficult time and at an increasing awareness that the U.S. Department of Education and the regional accrediting commissions are more and more compliance-oriented.
I was just wondering, have there been any changes to the Accreditation Commission?
Yes, there have been some commissioners gone off and some new ones come on, including our own Deputy Chancellor Skinner, who will be the Chancellor's Office representative on the commission. He goes to his first meeting in January. And there have been a couple of other additions to the commission and some folks that have termed off. The other thing that's taking place is that the standards are changing. They are, I think, every 8 to 10 years reviewed and changed, and that process has been ongoing, and they're nearing the end of that review and renewal process. So the standards are going to be different. I think the first group of colleges impacted by that will be, I think, in the June, the cycle for next spring. I think the ones that are going to be reviewed this fall are still on the old standards.
Not to 2016.
Is that right? 2016, right.
Member Epstein?
Yeah, I mean, what was you said a few years ago it was worse. What's the long-term pattern? Has it always been in like double digits, the number of percentages, number of colleges not in compliance?
No, in fact, the commission sent out their newsletter just last week. And of course, keep in mind that the western region is not only California, but it's also Hawaii and the Pacific Islands. So we make up, help me, I think about 80% of the colleges in the commission. But historically, there have been only a handful of institutions that have experienced sanction until about probably 5 or 6 years ago. And then those numbers started going up, and they went up pretty precipitously until 2012. That was the high point. And then they've started to tail back down now. So the trend is obviously headed in the right direction. But even so, this is far too many institutions on sanction.
I mean, I think 15% is very high. I mean, just being new here, that seems shockingly high to me.
Yes.
Any other questions?
We're going to move now to the update on workforce and economic development. And let me precede my brief comments, and then I'll introduce Von Tonquin-Liven by letting you know we're going to try to provide you with about 15 or 20 minutes worth of information, and then the lion's share of this we truly do see as a dialogue with the board. This, obviously, if you'll look back at this chart that I gave you early today, this would be a new significant initiative for California's community colleges. And I will refresh your memory going back to the Student Success Task Force and the results. There was one sort of persistent concern expressed at the end of the Student Success Task Force, and that was that folks did not feel as if career technical education were very well represented and very well reviewed as a part of that. I think both Vice Chancellor Tonquin-Liven and I would argue that this is a logical outgrowth of a student success activity, in that we have put into place, or are putting into place, the recommendations for all of our students up and down the state, and now is a very appropriate time to begin to take a look at our career technical occupational programs and workforce and economic development. Vaughn, you want to go ahead and bring those slides up? If you look behind the tab on workforce development, we did insert the slides that you're going to see. They are at the very back of this section, so if you want to follow along on the slides, you'll need to go to the very back of the section, and they look like this when you get to them. Just as a backdrop, and Vaughn will go into some detail, but some of you, or many of you, may have read Jim Clifton's book, The Coming Jobs War, which was written just a couple of years ago. And in that, author Clifton makes the case that in the years to come, we're going to see regions competing with regions, not only in the United States, but across the globe, and that those regions that are successful are the ones that are going to have jobs, high-value jobs for their citizenry. Places that don't have good jobs or that have anemic job growth are going to find their citizens leaving to go other places where they can get work. So if you look at California, and I attended last Thursday and Friday the state California Chamber of Commerce meeting, and they get a monthly or a quarterly update from the head of Wells Fargo, economist, who talked about the economic recovery in California. And for the first time since the Berlin Wall fell, California is likely in the next year to have lower unemployment than the United States, which would be the first time since the Berlin Wall fell that happened. So Finally, we're beginning to see job creation in California. And what Vaughn and I want to talk with you about today is a look at our workforce and economic development operation that would really focus on doing 4 things. First of all, preparing our students for the high-value jobs that currently exist in the state. We continue to hear employers say, I have good jobs, good-paying jobs. I can't find the folks with the skills to do those jobs. Secondly, is to position California, as we've seen Texas positioned in recent years, to attract jobs from other states to the state of Texas, to position California with a workforce that would attract jobs from other regions of the globe and the state to come to California. Again, there's a lot of quarrels about California's business climate, but the truth is if employers find a highly prepared workforce, they're going to bring their jobs where that workforce exists. Third is to create a workforce that undergirds and supports entrepreneurism and small business development where the greatest share of new job development takes place. So those are the 3 deliverables, and in order to do that, we have to figure out how to finance that kind of workforce and economic development training and student preparedness in our colleges. So we believe the way to do that is to take an approach not dissimilar from the way we approach student success, and to put together a task force, which we'll talk more in detail about, that would be representative of the state, of our own system of organized labor, of the public agencies, of all the stakeholders in the state, to take a real hard look at what we, California's community colleges, can do, 112 or 13, depending how you look at it, strong, to prepare a workforce that makes California more competitive and allows for higher value, higher wage jobs for our graduates. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chancellor Quinn Livin.
You want to do this one slide?
Yep, I just did.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right, so I get to do an infomercial slide to talk about the strength of our career technical education here. And I think it's in context of what does it cost to actually support a family in California? And it is darn expensive. So $61,000 for a family of 4 to live here, living wages. And you know, thanks to Patrick Perry and his system, the Salary Surfer, we've now come to realize the earning power of some of these career technical education AA degrees, where you can actually meet and raise a family in California. And so when we're talking about career technical education and setting up capacity and how we regrow the system's capacity, how we do it determines whether or not people can actually afford to raise their family here. That's the meaning of this work to California. So, you know, the Chancellor laid out that the future looks brighter for us in terms of employment. And, you know, those of us who've kind of been belaboring in the trenches in the downturn, everything feels much better today than it did 3 years ago. But you almost have to look at how we are comparing against all the other states, and it's not that impressive. I mean, we're really the bottom decile when it comes to our recovery rate. And, you know, some of you are sitting, you know, when I'm in the Bay Area, for example, driving through the Bay Area, it is happening. There's so much traffic because the technology sector is recovering. You wouldn't expect, you would think California is doing very well. But if you go visit different economic regions, you'll realize that the recovery is very uneven and highly correlated to the talent, the skills base of each of those regions. So in Imperial County, in Central Valley, in the Inland Empire, there's a much wider gap in terms of the talent base, which is holding their regions back from actually helping California's overall recovery. So our work in terms of closing the skill gap, our work in terms of getting industry-valued credentials and moving communities through that is really a key ingredient on whether or not these regions actually can compete. You've seen some of these statistics from Anthony Carnevale, who's one of the most renowned workforce economists in the country. It used to be that you can come out of high school and be able to get into the workforce. Over the last 30 years, our country created 63 million more jobs. But if you have a high school degree, there's actually 2 million less jobs for you. So what has happened over time is that the demand, sort of almost the entry level requirements to get into the job market has increased in terms of the bar. And so in the 70s, only 28% of jobs required more than a high school education. And by 2020, 2/3 of the job will require some level of post-secondary education. So some of that is the bachelor's and above, and there's a large chunk of that is called the middle skill area, where you don't need necessarily a bachelor, but it's more than a high school. So that's the middle skill, and that's really our sweet spot that we serve. What have we done so far in this work? Because when we look at the middle skill, let me just rattle off some of the current job openings right now. 693 jobs in diagnostic medical sonographers that make $84,000 a year. 210 jobs in magnetic resonance imaging technologists, $85,000 a year. 951 jobs for electrical power line and installers and repairers, $91,000 a year. These are all middle skills jobs. And if we can set the pathway and the entry point right, we can actually get our communities to be able to move into these family-sustaining careers. So we have done some work. You know, when I walked into this role 3 years ago, it was a state where all the workforce categoricals were cut. They were all put into flex, and they were at risk of not being reauthorized. So we worked really hard to begin to stretch the dollars, the incentive dollars that we had, and to do more under a unifying framework that, Debbie Malumed, Member Malumed had helped. She was on the advisory body. And we began to impose, under the Doing What Matters for Jobs and Economy framework, some changes on our own self, right? We inflicted the changes on our own self under those conditions. And so now 3 years later, this year, it was a very different conversation here in Sacramento. Not only were we not cut, and there was no question that we were being reauthorized, and then we were not flex, but the conversation shifted to what does the community college system need to really respond to the regional economies? And they actually added monies to help with some of the short-term needs of the system. So we've begun to lay the groundwork for the conversation. And if there's a conversation in Sacramento about workforce, the community colleges are at the table. But there's so much more that we need to do in order to evolve this. Now, as you know, under the Doing What Matters for Jobs and Economy framework, we began, like in the principle that's common to business, but maybe less so in public institution, we began to target investment because we only had a few incentive dollars, really, in those dark days. The first principle of targeting was against region. As you know, California is not a monolithic economy. Member Estelano talked about regional economies, and each regional economy is driven by different sectors. So we began to look at the state as a set of regional economies and enlisting from each region, what are your priorities? What are your sectors that are driving that? And we've begun to see promising evolutions in the nature of these regions. It used to be that it was all about Central Valley. Central Valley was really good, actually, at coordinating and planning their capacity and stretching the dollars. And we sought to take that model of collaboration and how do we incentivize other regions to coordinate that capacity, because career technical education is very expensive. So in San Diego, the college CEOs who often met, they admitted that we often talked about transfer, but we didn't talk about workforce issues, and they actually restructured the bodies in San Diego so that they had direct line of sight to the workforce and economic development regional conversation in their area. In Orange County, who is very interested in STEM and STEAM. STEAM is, you add the A for arts, for the creativity. They've decided to all meet all the 9 colleges. The chancellors all brought them together, and they decided they're going to double down in biomedical device and advanced manufacturing and make investments in that area and determine which college will have shared courses, which colleges will have specialties. And this is good regional planning, again, because CTE, a lot of these programs, it's not just a chalkboard. You actually need lab equipment to train a well-trained worker. In the East Bay, they had chosen 5 sectors, and they've decided to coordinate with the workforce system. And in each of these sectors, they went after conversations with their goal was to talk to 200 companies in each of these sectors in order to inform curriculum, in order to find work-based learning opportunities, in order to find placement. Because there's nothing better than a well-trained and experienced individual in terms of an employee that can hit the ground running. In the greater Sacramento area, Chancellor Brian King will tell you that this work also helped them secure a giant, I believe it's $15 or $16 million career pathway trust, where they're bringing together the K-12 system, the high schools, along with their community colleges to set up career pathways. So there are promising evolutions in each of these regions, but by looking at the state as a set of regional economies instead of one monolithic economy. Oh no. And then furthermore, we said invest in regions and then the sectors that drove those regions. And what we worked to do was also to engage the faculty to retool curriculum by having them have the conversation, making it easier for them to have the conversation with employers. So 200 faculty were turned out in an event that brought together the lynda.coms of the world and other companies in the information and communication space, digital media space, and they saw for themselves what it took to close the skills gap. And these educators are being funded right now to go seek and evolve their own credentials so that they can then teach the students. So there's a lot of work that's being done in order to retool our programs, working with the faculty and working with the Senate. And the Senate's going to be lending us a hand in helping evolve this. So we talked about targeting investments in regions, in sectors, and then the work that was laid, the foundation that was laid through the Student Success Initiative enabled a level of data and accountability that wasn't available before. So Patrick Perry's work in launching the Salary Surfer, the White House Domestic Policy Council looked into the Salary Surfer and that kind of wage mapping to inform how it would roll out and reshape the federal legislation called now the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. We've also rolled out tools like the Launch Board to help the field have data-based decision to back up, to back up its decision making. So it's a good thing I only have one more slide. And some would argue that perhaps we were not in a place where we were recognized at all in terms of these tools, but now we're clearly recognized as top decile in the country when it comes to these data tools for our system. So those are assets that we can build upon. And as a matter of fact, when the country looked at how it would reauthorize and reshape the federal legislation called the Workforce Investment and Opportunities Act, it studied what we did in terms of regions and sectors and data system, and all of that became baked into the law that was just recently signed into place that I had the fortune to be in the room to watch the signing of. But I think the sort of at the end of the day, my great slide, this one, if you see it in your pack,
It's great.
It's very good.
is is that California's need is much greater than our capacity right now, and it's a good time to focus us, and we need the conversation by the system on what does it take to close the skill gap. Yes, there's a skill gap at the BA level, but yes, there's an equal amount of skill gap in terms of the AA and certificates, and that is the space that we sit in. So what do we need to do to stretch the dollars, braid the dollars, get multiple systems to work together so that we can get California and its regional economy to the place that it needs to be?
So what we'd like to do in the next 30 to 45 minutes is entertain a conversation, just so we're clear on where we're going. We're not here today to ask your approval of this activity. What we'd like to do is entertain a conversation, and then between now and the November meeting, we're going to go to consultation at least once or twice, have some field conversations, and then come back to you in November with a specific recommendation that we would ask for your endorsement on at that point. But we'd like this conversation to be informed by your advice and counsel first, and then we'll move out into the field and have a broader conversation. So remember, what we hope to accomplish with this initiative is to help prepare our students for the jobs that exist in our state now. Secondly, to create a workforce that would attract jobs from outside the state. And thirdly, that would prepare entrepreneurs and small businesses to grow new jobs in the state. And then finally, to figure out a way to finance that. So with that,
Member Budnick, Member Avalos.
So talking about the entertainment industry for a second, this program at West LA College called Hollywood CPR. It's a nonprofit that is in partnership with West LA College, and they put it's a diversity program, but they put folks through a really rigorous year-and-a-half program, and then give them a pathway into the unions. And if they make it through this year-and-a-half program, they are in the union. And in entertainment business, it's very, unless your daddy's in the union, you're not getting in the union. So they made agreements with all the different local organizations, and they're graduating people into these unions at an incredible rate. I'm wondering if there could be some type of partnership with labor outside the entertainment business. In conversations I've had with Maria Elena Durazo, there's been some interesting apprenticeship programs that she's turned me on to. I'm wondering if, that for the entertainment business, that type of program can be expanded, because we definitely need a different type of population working on our films and TV shows. But also, are there other conversations with labor where we could actually introduce community colleges to different locals and actually have a training program that leads to union membership?
Yeah, I'd like to add on that as well. In my tour 3 or 4 months ago down in LA, I saw a lot of construction going on in different community colleges that I attended. And it just, to me is like a direct correlation between, the students that we have there doing, studying in different types of career paths as it relates to architecture or welding or, trades type work, that they actually can get internships or co-ops on campus, because there's so much construction on those campuses, but yet how many jobs or internships or co-ops are actually going to those students? That's just a correlation that makes sense to me, that, if we are passing all these great bonds, doing a lot of construction, shouldn't some of that work go to our students so they can get that first job? Because what my experience has been, going from not having experience to having experience is so critical. Right, so that's an idea.
Many colleges actually have done that, but Chancellor,
no, I think there are some isolated incidents of that going on, but I think that's something we need to be looking at, because as you point out, I don't know what the number is, but it's several $1 billion up and down the state being spent.
absolutely.
So I can actually speak to that. So that's okay, President
Member
Baca.
Swan.
So in Los Angeles, my old agency, the Community Redevelopment Agency, and this is actually how Vaughn and I got to know each other, we pioneered a local higher apprenticeship program. very much on the lines of what the entertainment industry, I think we predated that and created a system where there was a goal of achieving a 30% local hire for every job that had CRA subsidy behind it, a redevelopment subsidy behind it. But we had to make a deal with the unions. We allowed them to have basically a project labor agreement. So you had to hire folks that were going to be paying prevailing wage, and contractors that would have the first shot would be union contractors. But in return, the labor unions had to make available apprenticeship slots for disadvantaged workers and local workers. And we had a very specific definition of that. But we had to do something else. We had to create a pathway for those folks to even get trained up so that they would be qualified for the apprenticeship program. And we worked with faith-based communities, CBOs and others to get folks ready, apprenticeship ready, so that when those slots opened up on those construction sites, they could apply and they could get to the front of the line and skip over the kinship networks that you're talking about. That policy was then adopted by the LA Community College District, by the LA Metro Board, the City of Los Angeles Public Works Department, the Harbor Department, and the Los Angeles World Airports Department. So it's a model that's been replicated in other places. City of San Francisco has done it as well. Other public works departments have done it. And it's a model that's really great on construction, but it can equally be applied to other tradesmen. So to hear about Orange County being really interested in advanced manufacturing, that would take a little bit of work, but that would be another area where if we can connect up with the union apprenticeship programs, which are joint labor management apprenticeship programs, meaning they will only train people in apprenticeships when there's a guaranteed job. So it's by definition demand-driven. So, and because labor as well as management as well as the companies put money into these programs, everybody's got a skin in the game. They want each of the apprentices to have a successful entry into the program. So I think part of what is so exciting about what Vaughn's been working on is a sectoral approach to the economy. It's going to be different in every area. Absolutely fabulous to hear that West LA College is doing it around the entertainment industry. Where else should it be but Los Angeles to pioneer something around the entertainment crafts? When we had a booming construction industry, we did it in Los Angeles. And now that it's coming back into Los Angeles, we need to re-up those programs. Redevelopment ran away by the governor a few years ago, so that model program has now fallen apart. And right now, there isn't a similar requirement for programs for construction sites that receive public subsidies to do local hiring and apprenticeships programs. But for the different sectors that Vaughn's talking about, for something like advanced manufacturing, you could work with the metal workers, you could work with the machinists. There's aerospace industries that are very interested. I'm not so sure about the biomed stuff, but we need to think through that. So there's certainly good models for working with union apprenticeships, but there's also a model around disadvantaged workers and local hire requirements that in the absence of a union apprenticeship, you could work with CBOs to create that pipeline of workers. And that's where the community colleges really need to step in if there's not an established apprenticeship program. So it is not surprising to me that the reauthorization was modeled very much on what we've done here in California, because California's really been a leader in a sectoral approach and a regional approach to this work. But these are all great examples of things that we need to just scale up and make flexible enough so that each region can tailor to their own needs. But a critical component is each region has to have that type of collaborative that Vaughn describes, where there's a careful, comprehensive analysis of what does your regional economy look like, where do you have the most growth capacity, and that's where we focus the training. And you have to have, I'd love to hear this idea of the 200 employers. You have to actually have employers sitting at the table. Otherwise, it's a theoretical approach. We may be training punch key operators in a computer age or something.
Thank you for that very valuable insight. Other comments?
Just to simply say that what she's been saying, because I'm not all aware of that, must be in keeping a little bit with this article that you put in here about In This Together, the hidden cost of. And those were some of the policy recommendations, so to speak, is to build all these apprenticeship programs like use AmeriCorps even, or Youth Opportunity. And as I was reading this, I kept wondering what are the examples in California about these apprenticeships and internships and registered apprenticeship and on and on. So And how do you take what you said and move it into other areas and make it successful there where people are not doing that already?
Vice President Moore?
First, I want to thank the Chancellor for bringing this forward to us for consideration. And when we did the Student Success Task Force, where I was concerned, the state was in a period of rapid erosion of our foundation, of our economy, of our funding, and all that too. There was a gun to the head of our system, and the system then reacted in a very aggressive, proactive, and creative way. And then how will we be able to kind of continue that sense of urgency, that significant, ambitious, and bold action and reform will need to be undertaken. And so I'm hoping we can create that climate that will allow us to move forward. And then not only labor, I hope that we can continue, as our Vice Chancellor pointed out, focus on the job creators, the businesses that are trying to invest in California, but some of them are leaving. We always open the paper up and hear about Tesla now moving its operation to other. And so we're going to have to find ways to overcome a tax break in Texas in order to show, as the governor points out, you're going to be much better off with the workforce and the resources that are available to you in California, despite some one tax break that you might get in Nevada or something like that.
I might just add that, the Student Success Task Force was designed rather broadly initially, but then we focused in on the things that we came up with, the 22 recommendations. And one of the criticisms we did get subsequent to finishing that work is that we hadn't focused in on career technical education. And my response to them is, well, we just chose not to do that. That doesn't mean that we didn't want to or anything, but we were really narrowing down the scope of the work, for as significant as it was, to those areas that we addressed. So, the Chancellor is absolutely right in taking this up and moving it up in the agenda, similar to some of the areas that we talked about with student success, and really fulfill the whole mission of the community colleges. So, we'll be very much looking forward to that recommendation in November. Member Budnick?
Do we know how many of our community colleges are offering coding?
Medical code?
No, coding.
Computer
Coding in Mr. Avalos' industry. This seems to be, what I'm told, is the fastest growing industry, and there's not enough people to fill the jobs.
Yeah.
Do we know?
I can't. Vaughn, do you know? I mean, it's a significant number. I don't know whether it's 50 or 75.
So I've been doing some diligence in this because Member Van Loon, but also Member Ronaldo has been expressed interest in this area. The future, there's 3 areas that we want to incentivize the field to increase its capacity. The first is in anything that's touching the area of data science. So data analytics, data visualization. I mean, what did they say? They say that there's more data invented every 2 days now since the beginning of time up to the year 2011.
Right.
So it's the amount of data is going to be a source of job creation and advantage if we can have the skill sets to tap into it. The second area is the area of UI design. So anything design and visualizing apps. This is an area of great growth that will stay in the market at least 5 and foreseeable years out. And then in the area of coding, coding is just another manifestation of language. And so the latest and greatest is Hadoop. Am I right? Yeah, and that's on the emerging side because it's actually needed for the data science side. Now, what's the conundrum is here's the question. So Hackbright Academy is a for-profit entity that just got built, and students are paying $15,000 for a 10-week boot camp.
Wow.
The placement rate is 90% with $90,000 salaries. And in visiting this institution, I have come to realize, and also speaking with employers, that you don't actually have to have all these prerequisites at this high level. We can actually be doing this work and get more of our communities in. So this is, as industry is evolving, but the rate that industry evolves is very fast. The question is, how do we set up structures that respond
Right.
to this need, but at the pace that industry is moving so that our communities can compete? So that's a long-winded answer to the question that you're posing, which is really we don't have enough capacity in this area. Our pathways are not set up well.
I mean,
Certainly, your your comments deal with a very specific interest, but points out to a larger issue that as we move forward on some of these initiatives, it's not that colleges aren't doing something or some others aren't, but as a state and a system, I think we need to be able to fill in the gaps and make sure that we have a strategic plan that allows colleges to better understand the changes that are occurring. Remember, Avalos?
Yeah, that's why originally I asked the question when we add more courses or we're starting to bring back courses, the question is, what's the strategy behind that? Because, it's around the alignment to the job opportunity, obviously regionally, but also just overall in California. I mean, the reality is we import so many jobs in high tech. I don't know what the quote is. It's over 60,000 jobs a year that come from other parts of the world to high tech because we can't fill them here locally. And so the question is, what can we do as we start adding new courses or adding courses back that really start focusing on that work opportunity for those, employers, but also the students that can go through community colleges?
One of the things that Vaughn has told me all along is that the funding for career technical education courses is really a challenge, and I have been very resistant to go to differential funding because I think that creates a whole nother set of problems. However, when I was in the Central Valley recently, to answer your question, one of the chancellors there said, what happens is we have a feast or famine in terms of our funding, and when our funding is going down, we have to cut the programs that save us the most money, i.e. the career tech programs. When the money comes back, we have to add back the courses that we can get students in the quickest, which tend to be psychology and history and English and music. So there's this built-in, his point was, a built-in disincentive to invest in career technical education over the long haul and protect it when the money turns down. Thus, the fourth thing we mentioned, is to figure out how to fund this, because I don't think, Vaughn doesn't think, that we can enhance and sustain a robust workforce development initiative with the current way we fund this. Having said that, I don't know that I'm ready to go to differential funding, but we do have to figure out how to make that work.
but
Everybody.
I mean, don't you think there's a political play here in that I can't imagine the governor or the Department of Finance loves that we're importing all these folks from overseas to take the jobs that we don't have folks trained to do? Do you think there is a piece of legislation or a conversation with the Department of Finance about how to train these workers and train them quick to start taking these jobs? Because like she said, I mean, we could probably cut a 5-minute video in a month to sell to people. Guess what? We have a 10-week training at the community colleges for virtually free that has a 90% job placement rate, and you're going to make $80,000 to $100,000 a year. They'll be running.
Yeah, I absolutely do. The thing we have to be careful of is we have to make sure what we ask for is what we really want and need. And I'll give you an example. In the pre-dot-com bust, we were roundly criticized for not turning out enough high-tech workers. And that was justifiable criticism. So many of us, and I was at a district level at that point, ramped that training up dramatically. And when we do that, we hire a lot of full-time faculty to deliver that education. And then the dot-com thing went bust. We had all these full-time faculty, many of them tenured, that we now had to figure out whether they could teach English or history in order to keep their load. So what the challenge for us, because I think you're right, I think the state can and will invest. We have to make sure we ask for the right thing so that we don't have unintended consequences because these jobs are cyclical. The demand for them is cyclical. We have to figure out a way to fund and remain nimble so we train the right workers for the right jobs when they come out.
Member Estolano? And then Member
Reed.
Reed.
I'll cede to Member Reed
Okay,
since he
Member
hasn't
Reed.
spoken.
Well, I know that we need to focus on job creation, but one of the components of this labor market, to me, is the retention and the stability of job creation. And what I mean by that is, we went through a period where there was a real shortage of teachers, and when we really looked inside the system, there was a lot of teachers that were credentialed, but there was a lot of teachers that didn't want to teach. And when we look at nursing, this has been an emphasis of this board for many years, is the RN programs, and we find that after a short period of time, a good deal of the nurses actually leave the profession after 2 or 3 years because of the environment that they're put in and their work environment. So I think a small component of this issue we cannot forget, it's important, yes, to create new jobs, but we need to keep those people in those jobs in a productive capacity to lead the state forward. And I really do believe that it's a major issue in a lot of these areas. So that's my comment.
I'd like to just speak on funding. I think it's, you talked a lot in your presentation, Vice Chancellor, about the braided funding sources, and we haven't heard that much about it, I mean, which I know you have so little time to do your presentation, but might also point out that the conversation about workforce development has really shifted. In the past, economic development in California was really just a proxy for real estate development, right? There really wasn't, real estate development was equated to economic development, and policymakers and legislators didn't really think about long-term investment in economic development. They just wanted to see cranes in the sky. So we're at this really interesting point where workforce training and human capital investment is now at the center of the debate of economic development. That's pretty new, actually, for California. This is happening up and down the state. It is also true that we're all struggling in the state for a new mechanism to promote economic development. With the demise of redevelopment, local governments just don't have a secure funding source. So I think as you move forward on the task force or do your listening tour, it'll be really important to engage business, the job creators, in thinking creatively about a dedicated funding source that helps to make sure that it's flexible, you're able to nimbly respond to changes in industry, to not have what happened on the dot-com bust happen again. Secondly, to have a dedicated revenue stream that is jointly and collaboratively directed, not just by local government, which has its own pressures, but by educators as well as industry. And then third, that there be a mechanism involved that has employers directly engaged in investing in this, so that if there's going to be made a commitment of public resources to train a number of whatever it is, programmers, coders in a particular industry, that there be a commitment at the end of that by employers to hire. And we talked about this last night, Chancellor Harris, the green jobs, of which I know a lot about. We haven't been involved in the green jobs movement for a number of years now. We trained so many solar installers and energy efficiency technicians. We don't need those anymore. And it's because it wasn't driven by demand.
That's right.
It was driven by a concept and really compelling theory. But you have to have that commitment of jobs and meaningful chance of employment before you double down on an investment in a particular industry. So I think there are a few principles that as you form a task force, you might want to have a financing group. Think about some of those principles of flexibility, of accountability, but also the shared collaborative investment decision-making, and then having industry actually have to make some commitments if they're going to receive the benefit of our scarce community college CTE training dollars.
Vice President Baum.
I just wanted to add, it was a year ago at this meeting, just now we were in Coalinga at West Hills District, being hosted by Chancellor Gornick, and it was exciting to see, and I'm hoping that is also part of our conversation, because I remember specifically them showing us hands-on the innovations that are taking place in the workforce development with respect to agriculture and pest control, and also in an era where we're really facing serious water crises. And so that's another way where I can imagine creating that crisis that would compel people to action, is that we need to train a state on how to survive in water crisis as well as economic crisis. And the community college training is going to push the state forward in how to adapt to new realities that we're going to be facing with respect to water and conservation, but also lead to jobs and be able to sustain our agriculture industry that's so important to the state.
Member Malumet.
I'm going to shift gears here. So in the healthcare world, you mentioned sonographers. I don't know if everybody here knows that's your ultrasound techs, and MRI techs. And I think those are amazing fields that I don't think young people know much about. And one time I took my very sick dog to a very high-tech dog hospital that can be used for humans in the event of an emergency. And the ultrasound tech there was the ultrasound tech that I'd work with at my local hospital. So, just to let people know, young people, that let's say, a lot of people want to become a vet. Well, they're not all going to become vets. So, there's this field that you can work with animals and you can earn a lot of money, and you can do it anywhere in the U.S. So I'm kind of thinking, well, how do you let those young people know it? And I was talking to Keitha. My friend is a school psychologist in L.A., and she's very concerned about the young people not understanding that there's a lot of jobs out there for them, and they don't think they'll ever go to college. And she wants us to reach the 14-year-olds, so how do we reach down that low to even let them know that there's these things available? And one of the things my husband did, and not all legislators are as you paint them without the long term, and they only want the cranes, I just want to say that. But how do you reach down to them? So he started in Long Beach. We needed teachers who spoke other languages because we're so diverse. And they ended up at the Long Beach State. They had the psychology students become mentors for the young people in high school who had never thought about becoming teachers, and they all had their second language skills built in. So the mentors went to the high schools, they became their mentors, big brother, big sister. They had to deal with all their social issues. They were shocked how much, rape, families, incest, poverty, abuse, drugs, and support them all the way, like, let's think about you becoming a teacher. You've already got the skill. Let's just get you through some college and kind of work with them through it all. So I'm just kind of wondering, in the healthcare field, is there a way that we can reach down? And I don't know who that would be. I was kind of thinking the very large hospital systems, could they say to their employees, would you like to be involved in this? Instead of take your child to work, why don't you take a 14-year-old student to work one day a year? Have them all kind of reach down to the schools. I know there's a lot of confidentiality and patient issues, but there might be a way that you could just have them come in for a half day and see what you do. And get them excited about the field, because in healthcare we need a lot of support people, and I've always felt the world doesn't know all these jobs that we have in a hospital to help people, and they really range in skill level tremendously. I mean, they can be some very, the house cleaners in a hospital do a great job taking care of patients, and there's a lot of great stories about them. So there's all kinds of things. So I'm just kind of thinking in those ways.
Any other comments? Member Van Loon?
Yeah, I think that inclusion of the K through 12 system could be vital to what this task force concludes. I was reading in one of these reports that they offer CTE programs in the high school, and upon completion before high school, they would the state would award them with $1,000 or something of that sort. So I think if we could include our concurrent enrollment with the K-12 and CTE programs, that would end up allowing us to have a lot more interest and a lot more outreach to those potential students that want to enter the workforce almost immediately after high school, and we could give them the opportunity to do such things. And on that note, with those particular students, offer integration of GE courses and things of that sort relevant to the career technical training that they're receiving. So for instance, in regard to tech. If it's a coding CTE program or something of that sort, offer general ed classes or computer science classes relevant to what they're doing so they can also achieve upward mobility after getting in the workforce with their certificate and achieve that degree as well. And I think that could be a vital aspect of what we're doing with the task force and including the K through 12 system.
Very good, thank you.
I also heard was, it seems like we do some marketing, some opportunity for marketing, some opportunity to really help understand, for people to understand what the opportunities are out there in terms of high-paying skilled jobs. You know, I think I was shocked to hear some of these jobs that I've never heard about making $85,000, $90,000 a year. And this is someone who spent, 20 years in the career. And so, to me, it seems like, what are we doing around marketing, especially targeting young people, social media, obviously on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. What kind of plan do we have to make sure that we are reaching out to those students, to those young people, to really outline these opportunities that are in front of them, 4 or 5 years out for a job that they can do, get a 2-year degree and get high-paying opportunity there, especially in those low-income communities where, there's a lack of opportunity to know what jobs are out there because your network is so limited. Your network is basically the people who are around you, and you don't have, that network that gives you more than what you're exposed to. So I think it's really important for us to really think about what is our marketing plan, what is our communications plan, and how do we use social media to reach out to these future students that we have who are, 14, 15 years old.
Do we actually have the faculty that can teach these courses, these high-tech courses and the job creation that you're talking about?
It would be a range. So, we're calling on the field and all the faculty. David Morse is laughing. We're calling on the faculty to identify the skill gap, and then what does it take to actually get that curriculum in line. And in some areas, the match or the contribution from employers may be to loan some skill sets so that there's some instructional supplement, to the way that our, come and visit and teach a course or two. I mean, that's been done in the past or more. But there's all these structures that need to be created to say, this is all good because it's a form of matching. It's showing that industry has skin in the game in training their skilled workforce, and to encourage the field to figure out where to find the right skill set so that when students come out, they have the right skills. Chancellor?
Well, I think as important as do we have the faculty now, and this goes back to Member Budnick's question earlier about flexibility and how quickly we can respond, is that we're finally back in a period where we're seeing our funding increase. And part of what that means is new faculty positions being made available at the colleges. And one of the budget BCPs we put in for the next year is a pretty heavy dose of money for hiring new full-time faculty. So now's the time to be having these conversations as opposed to when it's going the other way and we're having to restrict the faculty. Now we're in a period where over the next few years we ought to see more and more faculty coming. If we can provide the flexibility that Scott talked about earlier and identify those high need areas quickly and create those programs quickly, then I think we can hire faculty not only to teach in the programs but to develop them right along. If we get into a period where we're back into retrenchment, it gets really hard to do that.
Member Belansky?
The only thing also to add into the discussion is a number of the fields require a lot of equipment that is very expensive or a lot of resources that are very expensive. Are there any kind of creative ways of working with employers where the employer says, we have a space or we have a site at our employment setting so that rather than you having to buy all this equipment and stuff, you'll be able to come in and offer classes there where we already have the, I mean, clearly to me in looking at stuff that happens that I'm familiar with, that's always the problem. We don't have the money to buy the new MRI machine or whatever you're going to use, or we don't have the money to buy this and we don't have the money to buy that. Could we come up with something different where you don't have to buy it, but I'm just thinking out loud. Sure. To be creative in the process, because they're going to get the people back to work with.
Member Sumner?
Well, one thing when you were talking about nursing, if the colleges were to offer more training in the sense of like ACLS, Advanced Cardiac Life Supports, PALS, Pediatric Advanced Life Support, or start doing other courses, that will get them jobs out of the junior colleges, but because there's not much hiring. But that's what the hospitals are wanting, is for them to come in already having their ACLS and having these things so that they don't have to pay for that. They don't hire new grads, but if you've got somebody who's coming in a community college can offer, let's offer more specialty in critical care thinking or critical thinking skills, that will bring them into the colleges, I think, getting jobs better. Because like at our hospital, it's like if you don't have your EDAP or your pediatric hours or different things like that, if they were to get those from the community colleges, that would be huge. They would be able to then get a job and then work and go to school. But right now, like nursing, a lot of hospitals are not hiring new grads. But if you've got all the other specialties, you come in with it. That's why I tell everybody, do your disaster training. Colleges, disaster training is huge to get jobs now. If you get, and you can go online to FEMA and get it and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, if we try to think out of the box a little bit, to think, okay, what do the local communities, like you said, by sectors, okay, in this sector, what do we need? Disaster preparedness is huge. Veterans, it's huge. They come with a lot of expertise that you need. So, you know, getting more into thinking out of the box.
Everybody?
I'd like to piggyback on what Mr. Avalos was saying around marketing. I've been speaking to Vaughn some about shooting some videos around the different areas that the community colleges offer, but I really feel like we need to, if we're going to take this seriously, we really need to kind of put our heads together and just figure out how really to sell stuff to young kids and not bore them to death. Or, I mean, it's not the MRI machine that's going to sell them to come do it. It's the cute girl or the cute guy that's operating the MRI machine, because that's what 17-year-olds respond to. So I really feel like if Kanye West is telling you to come into this program, it's probably going to work much better than myself. So we need to figure out a way. I mean, you have celebrities that are doing a ton of stuff around education reform. John Legend, the musician, Tobey Maguire, the actor, the list goes on and on. So it's like, how do you tap some of them in to helping you sell different programs? I just feel like you have to sexy it up a little bit and really show people what college is really about, which is not just the MRI machine or the textbook, but human interaction, and also inspire them. I mean, I think if it's a combination of, wow, there's cute girls and guys walking around campus, and there's an interesting course, and it leads to this outcome and this possibility of getting a job, and if you can accomplish that in a 3-minute video, because that's about their attention span, then they'll be running. And I think that's possible.
Any suggestions for the younger, like I was thinking those 14-year-olds? How do you kind of hook them to want to get, like, go to college? You know, they never thought.
Remember what I said about the cute guys and the cute girls?
Times two.
Yeah.
14 for sure. No sexual harassment.
I mean, literally, we sent one of our kids who was incarcerated to Morehouse University in Atlanta, and right next to Morehouse is Spelman, which is the all-girls school. And his first comment with me on day one after he saw Spelman was, if someone told me this existed out there, I would have never joined a gang. So,
Got to go for the motivation. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I was just going to say, as a father of a 14-year-old boy, I think he might be onto something.
I think we have to have a legislature.
Thank you for that very valuable insight. Just reaffirming, right? Any other comments or questions? Chancellor?
Yeah, thank you very much. This has been very helpful. We've taken a lot of notes. As I said, we'll be working on trying to put some structure to this, working with the faculty and through consultation, and then we'll be back to you in November with a little bit more clarity on where we go from here. But it's going to be our goal to get this thing ginned up and running in very early 15, and hopefully have recommendations as we did with the Student Success Task Force sometime mid-next year, so that, again, keeping in mind that it's our goal to finish the recommendations of the Student Success Task Force by the end of 15, we'd be well positioned to begin this initiative in the second part of next year and shift a lot of the energy and the horsepower we have over to that. So we genuinely appreciate your advice and counsel,
Vice President Blunt?
Obviously, the composition of this task force is going to be critical, and I anticipate you're already several steps ahead on that. But when you had people like you and Peter McDougall and Member Baca and Carol Liu and others on the Student Success Task Force, it just created so much more of a likelihood for success once the findings were complete. And so we look forward to seeing the recommendations for that. But this is something that will be appointed by the Board of Governors, correct?
That's correct.
And supported.
Thank you.
Move on.
Here, take a break.
Let's take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll get back to the final part. Has Lou Monville contacted you or?